Nobody in Washington saw this coming. A routine defense procurement, a standard fleet upgrade, an ally that had never seriously questioned the arrangement. Canada was supposed to sign the paperwork, take delivery of its F-35s, and move on. That was the plan. That was always the plan. Then Ottawa said no, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, deliberately, and with the kind of calm that unsettles people far more than anger ever does. Canada began taking Sweden's Gripen seriously, and the moment that calculation became real inside the Pentagon, the warnings started arriving. Not through press releases, not through public statements, but through diplomatic channels sharp enough to leave marks. 10,000 jobs, full technology transfer, national control over every software update, every weapons integration, every mission file. Sweden put that offer on the table. Canada did not dismiss it. What happened next exposed something Washington had spent decades hoping nobody would examine too closely. This was never really about fighter jets. Canada protects the second largest airspace on Earth. Arctic patrols are not theoretical exercises. Russian bomber flights near Canadian approaches have increased. The polar route is gaining strategic weight faster than most defense analysts publicly acknowledge. Canada does not fight wars in desert theaters. Canada defends frozen skies. That changes every calculation on the table. The CF-18S were aging. A replacement was inevitable. The F-35 had been the assumed answer for so long that questioning it felt almost procedural. Something Ottawa would do quietly before confirming what Washington already expected. Instead, the review turned real, and Sweden's JAS-39 Gripen entered the conversation with numbers that were difficult to ignore. Operating costs, $8,600 per flight hour against the F-35's $44,000. Not a rounding error. A structural difference that compounds across decades and thousands of flight hours into a figure that reshapes an entire defense budget. But the cost was only the beginning. The Gripen was engineered around a specific and uncomfortable assumption: that in a real conflict, your air bases will be hit first. Command networks will be disrupted. Centralized logistics will collapse. Sweden built this aircraft for that cold-soaked reality. Gripen pilots trained to operate from highways. Ground crews can refuel and rearm the jet in under 10 minutes using a team of 5. No massive infrastructure, no permanent runway required. Just dispersion, speed, and the ability to keep flying when everything around you stops working. The F-35 was built on different assumptions: deep integration, advanced maintenance facilities, constant digital connectivity, unmatched stealth, unmatched sensor fusion, capabilities that are genuinely extraordinary. Until the satellites go quiet, the data links break, and the support systems that make it lethal are exactly what the adversary targeted first. Neither aircraft is wrong. They answer different questions. The question Canada had to ask was which question actually applied to its geography, its budget, and its future. That is where the procurement debate became a sovereignty debate. Because here is what nobody in Washington wanted Canada to read carefully. The F-35 does not simply belong to the country flying it. Software updates require American approval. Weapons integration requires American authorization. Mission data flows through American-controlled pipelines. Sustainment, upgrades, operational parameters, all of it managed from outside Canada's borders. Ottawa would be flying the aircraft. Washington would hold the keys. The Gripen offered a different arrangement entirely. Once delivered, it belongs fully to the country operating it. No external software approvals, no foreign authorization required for weapons integration, national control over mission data, full technology transfer. And alongside that transfer, 12,600 Canadian jobs, manufacturing capacity embedded inside Canada's own industrial base, and a defense relationship that functions as a partnership rather than a subscription. Industry Minister Melanie Joly made the position clear. Defense spending should strengthen national security while delivering measurable domestic benefit. Saab's proposal did both, simultaneously, without asking Canada to choose between them. Washington's response confirmed everything Ottawa had already suspected. U.S. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra warned that a reduced F-35 purchase would force NORAD restructuring. American fighters would need to fly more Canadian patrols. The implication was direct and deliberate. Choose the Gripen and the United States compensates by expanding its own operational presence inside Canadian airspace. That was not a technical argument about radar signatures or interoperability protocols. That was leverage, applied openly by an ally against a partner. And it arrived in the same window that President Trump was deploying tariff threats against European allies over unrelated disputes, reinforcing what Ottawa had already begun to understand. Defense cooperation and economic pressure now operated inside the same framework. They were not separate conversations. They never had been. When Washington issued those warnings, it was not speaking from a position of strength. It was speaking from a position of fear. Fear that Canada would demonstrate something the Pentagon had spent years hoping no core ally would prove, that independence and interoperability are not mutually exclusive, that a country can maintain full operational control over its own air power while remaining a committed NATO partner, that the dependency was never a technical requirement. It was a structural preference, built into the architecture of every alliance relationship Washington manages. If Canada proves that, others will notice. Finland, Norway, nations currently evaluating their own long-term defense postures. The Gripen already flies with Hungary, Brazil, and the Czech Republic. None of them lost their alliance credentials. All of them retained something Canada is now reaching for. The decision is not final. The review continues. The pressure from Washington has not disappeared and will not disappear quietly. But something has already shifted. Canada forced a conversation that core U.S. allies have avoided for decades. Not because the F-35 is a bad aircraft. It is not. But because dependency and partnership are not the same thing. And Ottawa decided it was time to say that out loud. The question that remains is not which jet Canada chooses. It is whether Washington has genuinely heard what Canada said in the asking. Other nations are not watching the procurement. They are watching the resistance. They are watching whether an ally can push back against the architecture of American defense influence and emerge from that pressure with its position intact. That precedent is worth more than any airframe. Subscribe for deep dives into the defense and economic shifts that rarely surface in mainstream headlines, because the next move in this story is already underway, and it will not announce itself. You said, Enging Lapate, again do Thora Baraho.